So I just want to hear from a couple people kind of what was the sum of that experience. So if I can get some brave souls to use their outside voice to describe what that experience was like. Your last experience talking with a finance person. Here we go, right here. It was complicated. Okay, like that. What else? Others? Yes, here. They lack innovation. Ooh. No offense, right? CFO. All right, one more. How about somewhere over here in the side of the room? Aha. Okay, great. Okay. So I also have a lot of these same thoughts, right? And I myself, a former chief financial officer, served in systems. And as I would go through this experience, I would think to myself, like, I wonder why that is. Why is it that they say these things that they do? And every time I ask the question differently, they say the same thing over and over and over and over again. And a lot of love in my heart for CFOs, finance officials in the state of California. They do really hard work, managing millions, if not billions of dollars. And so this took me down this question of, how do we think about funding? How do we think about money in the context of government? And the work of the panels today are really focused on the now. What can we do now to think about either micro innovations, bigger innovations in the space of government and nonprofits and collective impact that allow us to get closer to integration? And so I figured that it was important, as a mentor once said, kind of keep your eye on the ball, but another eye on the horizon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the horizon. And I want to make an offering to you at the end of this. And I'm going to get to that offering in 3 parts. You guys ready? Okay. So, part 1, history. For those who cannot learn from it, history are doomed to repeat it. Edmund Burke. Let's start here. I know, he's like a really old white dude. And you're like, already, where is Jason going? I've lost him. He's gone. One of the things that we can find in just about any system, dynamic, structure, or feature is we can identify kernels of our history. For example, the separation of power is a key building block of American democracy. It allows us to understand and be pliable and flexible in those that might threaten the idea that we each have a voice in democratic society. In the practice of finance, specifically accounting, its history can be traced all the way back to the 1400s. The gentleman up on the screen is an Italian monk by the name of Luca Pacioli. And one of the things that's really amazing about this gentleman, not to least of which to mention is that he lived 600 years ago, is he established a method called double entry accounting. If anybody knows anything about finance and accounting specifically, double entry accounting is now the basis of every way that we account for any transaction financially that happens in business and government in this world, literally. And this is the guy that theorized and proved that this is a way that we should be accounting for resources. And specifically what the definition says is that every single financial transaction has equal and opposite effects in at least 2 different accounts. So what that means is if, for example, I establish a contract and I give that contract to a vendor, in the accounting system, I have to record both that transaction of giving the money away, but then I also have to record how that transaction impacts my organization. This is the basis of fundamental accounting. The other thing that's really interesting about this gentleman is that he set out a set of principles. We now have 16 of them in accounting. And for anybody that's never taken an accounting course, you probably don't know them. But what's most fascinating about these principles is that they are used as almost the Bible for accountants. They are things that they follow and things that they hold true to. They're almost the anchors by which they make decisions relative to the way that they think about and treat money in any system, business or government. Now, one of the really interesting things about this double entry accounting system is that it's got pretty amazing references to other things in nature. For example, Newton's third law says that for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. What's beautiful about double entry accounting is that it reflects that law. What's even more fascinating is that it wasn't until 222 years later that Newton came up with that law. But that's a story for another day. So I'm going to start in this principle. This is the one that we're going to focus on today, one of those 16 that I mentioned, and it's called the separate entity principle. What it says is basically that transactions of an organization should be kept separate from its owners and other businesses. So if I'm running a business or a government agency, that if I'm engaging in a set of financial transactions, I have to keep them inside of that bucket. Because for anybody else that would want to know what I'm doing outside of that bucket, we should be able to transparently communicate what we did with the money. Makes sense, right? Makes a lot of sense. In fact, what they say about this principle is it shouldn't look like this. You shouldn't be able to commingle funds within these organizations or agencies, that it has to look something like this. And when you think about the interactions that we have with any government agency now in the state of California, in local government, across this country or across this world, it is the picture on the right that defines the separate entity principle. Part 2, binding. Invisible threads are the strongest ties. Friedrich Nietzsche. So one of the other really interesting things about this separate entity principle, and frankly, the entire establishment of accounting, is that its basis starts in commerce, it starts in business. And in particular, if we try to boil down this idea of like, well, what is business? Well, it's revenue generation that justifies ongoing service to customers, right? That's the basis. I'm collecting money, and if I collect enough of that money, it allows me to basically continue to serve clients and customers, right? Is that the way that we work in government? Where do we start with government? We start in the other place. We start with serving the public. That's the reason for our existence. And then, once we serve the public, it justifies the continued investment by taxpayers. So look at this slide. It is the mirrored opposite of the way that we think about our work in business. Yet, the accounting systems that we have established for all government agencies in this country and around the world are based on business. So about 100 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Francis Oakley wrote this text, Principles of Government Accounting and Reporting. And it was directly a derivative of all those principles and all of those basic building blocks of accounting that I've already mentioned. And this is the founding of what is now known as the Governmental Accounting Standards Board in the United States. It is the entity that sets the rules for the way that we report. For anybody that's familiar with a SACS report in public education, all of that is based on the rules that GASB have put together. If you look at a federal budget report, all of that is based on the rules that GASB establishes. And part of the work that Francis did was really to say that we have to make sure that government is accountable to the public. Makes a ton of sense. But the basis of it was really rooted first in both population growth that was happening during the first part of the 1900s, and later that really kind of drove this issue of financial transparency around corruption, right? So we had to make sure we knew where government funds were going. And that the adaptation emphasized money first and the public second. It emphasized money first and the public second. And if we look around in our systems, we can see those references everywhere. We think first about, did we spend the money in the right way? And then we ask the question, did the child get what they need? Did the family get what they need? So Really, it's trying to make the invisible visible. And so our predecessors in this way have constructed a system that separates rather than combines public assets and resources to serve the public. We keep education separate from social services, from health, from other organizations that are serving children and youth. They don't do it because they think that that's the right way to do it. They do it because history tells them that's the way you need to do it. And that's the invisible part. Thousands, tens of thousands of workers that sit and understand and record financial transactions think in this way. It is, in my opinion, one of the most magnanimous barriers we have in the finance world to thinking about true integration. And furthermore, when you look at many of the attempts that there have been to, quote, create flexibility around government funds, they're meek and rarely used. In fact, there's a bit of hypocrisy that a colleague shared with me last night in that the federal government is now promoting a series of webinars about blending and braiding out of the very office that creates 15 different grant programs that go out to local agencies, all with different rules, by the way, that are very difficult to combine, right? They have that power, yet here they are. So in this way of modern innovations in public finance, our undersized attempts to rearrange public dollars to better provide services is grossly undertaken. Part 3, snowball effect. I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create many ripples. Mother Teresa. We describe this pillar as sharing and funding. The world of finance cannot comprehend what sharing means. If you ask a finance official, we want to share resources with another agency, they will tell you that you cannot do that. They will tell you what you can do is contract with that other agency in which you tell them what they need to do, and then we can give them money, right? The concept of sharing is a foreign, if not incomprehensible notion for people in finance. So I would suggest that it's really more like integration, true integration, that these agencies are bringing money together to share in a common set of goods for children and youth. But here's the problem. We don't actually know how to do that. There is not a mechanism today in public accounting that allows us to do that fundamentally. There are hints of it. So here is my offering. Ready? First, that we need larger funding pools. And those pools should have increased flexibility to invest in cultural building, foreign concept in finance, room and space for people to build trust with one another, that allow them then to justify the use of resources aligned to state policy goals. But it comes with the exchange that there's a greater amount of accountability. And we have to make that trade-off. Otherwise, in my opinion, we don't get to a place where we can really innovate. 2, pilot blended component units through JPAs to advance balanced integrated financing across partners. This concept of blended component units does not exist in the United States today. The only place it exists is in the European Union, and even they are struggling to figure out how to think about services that cross both sectors within countries as well as the countries themselves to create a better supportive societal set of supports for children, youth, and families. In the short run, innovations like what you're going to hear about immediately after and in the learning sessions, we have to keep pushing on. And as much as I disparage blending and braiding and say that it is a hypocrisy of the current system, it is a mechanism that we can use. And it's a mechanism we can use to prove the point. The point is the rules that those in power, the elected leaders, have established can change. They have the power to do that. But we have to rewire our mental models, not only about the way in which we account for those resources, but also how those resources are used to build culture and trust. Metrics, by the way, that I think are just as important as reporting on a net ending funding balance in any association or agency. My colleague LaShawn Francis was up here earlier and she talked about intellectual humility. And I do not know the answers to a lot of this right now. I simply put this in front of you as an offering to think about and keep your eye on the horizon as you work with your colleagues in finance offices and other places in government to think about how you bring financial resources to bear on the work that you are doing with integrated care. So with that, I want to bring up a colleague of mine, Mariah, to talk a little bit about what her thoughts are as one of our youth on shared finance. Let's all welcome Mariah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariah. I am a senior at Valley High School. I've been here the past 3 days, and I will talk to you guys about shared financing. Most people ask why we should pay the organization. They are paying for the youth to go through these programs and better themselves, leading them in the right direction. Paying for these programs are not easy because there are hundreds of youth that really need them. And even paying about 20 of them can cost $6,000 to $10,000. I have been in many of these programs, and I have gained about $500 to $300. And I have noticed that I am not the only one in these programs. By average, there is usually about 15 through 25 youth in one place. Most people think or can wonder if giving them money is a bribe. In a way, by giving the youth money for joining programs can be seen as a bribe. But in reality, it's an important opportunity to earn money and gain experience. Even though many adults shut down a youth's perspective in situations that they don't think they should know what it is or may not consider the fact that they do. And now we have come to create these meetings and programs for the youth perspectives and their opinions. Youth go through things that adults go through, and at times see things differently. Everyone's life is different, and providing income to them gives them the chance to put it towards something good. For example, helping out their family for bills if they choose to, as well as getting school supplies. And some of the youth are fosters and orphans, so it could really help them. Even if a youth chooses to use their money for something that they want, that is just fine, because they earned the money with their hard work. They are the ones putting in the effort to show up, even if it is taking time out of their day. Even if they are late, it proves and shows that they are understanding of what needs to happen and what needs to be done. These checks and gift cards that the youth receive are incentive, meaning it stimulates them to take action and work harder. It pushes them to really get into their own well-being, that yes, something needs to be done. Some things that we are doing are great, but there are ways that we could do better. Because we come to realize that it's not about the money, but about us. And yes, the money is a great addition, but shouldn't have any further discussion. Every youth is the reason why we have these programs and why there are so many people in this room, because we are your future. In reality, the community is in our hands. We have that right to make decisions as the future leaders of society. We have many youth leaders that have come up on stage telling you the change that needs to happen. And the sooner it happens, the better. The more we do this, the more we talk about the youth, is the more we can create understanding in others and bring forth information that no one really thinks about, because we can't just talk about the basics, because it's like talking about a country without including the states and cities. The point I'm making is it's best to start early. Youth are at the bottom and we are carrying ourselves to the top. In this situation, we are the cities and one day we'll become the country.